explainer about mortgages. And you might already know this, but basically someone that wants to buy a house will often borrow hundreds of thousands of dollars from a bank. In return, the bank gets a piece of paper called a mortgage. Every month, the homeowner has to pay back a portion of the principal plus interest to whomever holds the piece of paper. If they stop paying, that's called a default, and whomever holds that piece of paper gets the house. The reason I'm saying whomever holds the paper rather than the bank is because the bank, the original lender, often sells that mortgage to some third party. And the reason I say often is because this happens all the time.
Never out-hustle or outwork the U.S. print press. Black men have hustle, we have work ethic. White men have the U.S. printing press. Why would you say the white man has the U.S. printing press? The white man has the U.S. printing press. 2008 recession verifies that the white man has a printing press. Let me explain. How did the housing crisis happen? It happened because the banks were artificially creating mortgages with overpriced housing to create a bubble till it bust.
Homeowners borrow money from banks or other lenders. Then, Fannie and Freddie buy these mortgages and package them into securities. Then they sell those securities to investors. Investors buy them because they're considered safe, because Fannie and Freddie take on much of the risk. Lenders and banks benefit too. Since the government takes on much of the default risk, lenders can make more loans to more people. Together, Fannie and Freddie now back about half of new U.S. mortgages.
To create a bubble till it bust. Where were they getting the money from? The banks will create a mortgage. A lot of times interest only, adjustable rate on mortgages, what they call ARMs. You only pay the interest. And they will make a person be able to afford a house based off of the low entry point, but he would never be able to afford the principals. And they would package that mortgage, take that $100,000 mortgage to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, which was government entities, and they would sell that mortgage for $200,000-$300,000. All you have to do is go to your computer, look up a mortgage calculator, and do the calculation. How long a 30-year mortgage will last.
What you're looking at here is a mortgage calculator. Using this calculator to generate the estimated automation schedule for your current mortgage, quickly sees how much interest you could pay and your estimated principal balance. You can even determine the impact of any principal prepayment. Press the report button for the full yearly, monthly, annualized schedule. So $100,000 house, 30-year mortgage, 8% interest, $733.76, right? But what you end up doing paying for that $100,000 house, you end up paying $264,160, right? Over the life of that 30-year mortgage. So this is what Europeans was doing. They was creating these mortgages, making the house affordable for you, so you can only start off with this entry level, so that they can sell the mortgage back to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac for a couple $220,000, doubling the price. This is why I say that they're getting the money directly from the print press. How do you expect to keep up?
They did this by refinancing mortgages at very low interest rates as well, or starting them off at adjustable rate interest mortgages and allowing people to get the equity out of their houses, pay off their credit card debt, and things of that nature, but have this balloon interest rate, but have this higher mortgage with another interest rate, right? And eventually, when it came time to pay on the principals, a lot of people couldn't do that, so it forced a collapse. So these bankers who lived high off the hog from overinflating the market, creating these mortgages while you're working, trying to pay off debt, build your credit, save money for a down payment, they're ballooning the mortgages So you went from having to save $10,000 to now $13,000 for a down payment, 10% on this house, to the following year maybe $17,000, constantly pricing you out of the range of the market.
Tax lending requirements and low interest rates drove housing prices higher, which only made the mortgage-backed securities and CDOs seem like an even better investment. If the borrowers defaulted, the bank would still have this super valuable house, right? No, wrong. Let's go to the thought bubble. Actually, let's go to the housing bubble. You remember bubbles, right? Rapid price increases driven by irrational decisions. Well, this was a bubble, and bubbles have an annoying tendency to burst. And this one did. People just couldn't pay for their incredibly expensive houses or keep up with their ballooning mortgage payments. Borrowers started defaulting, which put more houses back on the market for sale. But there weren't buyers, so supply was up, demand was down, and home prices started collapsing. As prices fell, some borrowers suddenly had a mortgage for way more than their home was currently worth. Some stopped paying. That led to more defaults, pushing housing prices down further. As this was happening, the big financial institutions stopped buying subprime mortgages, and subprime lenders were getting stuck with bad loans. By 2007, some really big lenders had declared bankruptcy. The problem spread to the big investors who'd poured money into these mortgage-backed securities and CDOs, and they started losing money on their investments. A bunch.
Perverse incentive is when a policy ends up having a negative effect opposite of what was intended. Like mortgage brokers got bonuses for lending out more money, but that encouraged them to make risky loans, which hurt profits in the end. That leads us to moral hazard. This is when one person takes on more risk because someone else bears the burden of that risk. Banks and lenders were willing to lend to subprime borrowers because they planned to sell the mortgages to somebody else. Everyone thought they could pass the risk up the line. The phrase "too,"
because they was getting money handed to them hand over fist through the government by selling these mortgages to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Then when the bubble busts and they go into debt, a president, Obama, who black people voted 97% for, goes into the White House, right? He goes into the White House and he bails these same banks that caused the collapse of the economy out, giving them trillions of dollars. These same banks turned around and gave the executives who were responsible for the crisis billions of dollars in bonuses. All this money comes from the U.S. press. This money was printed and given to them. How do you think your labor is going to keep up with a printing press?
And now, a look at the infamous big bank bailout, by the numbers. According to documents released through the Freedom of Information Act and published by Bloomberg Markets Magazine in its upcoming January issue, the bailout was far bigger than the Federal Reserve let the public or even members of Congress know at the time. In fact, from the start of the financial crisis in 2007 through March of 2009, the Fed loaned or guaranteed the banks some $7.7 trillion, about half the value of all the goods and services produced by the U.S. economy. That's 11 times the $700 billion in aid provided by the Treasury Department's better-known Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP. On just one day, December 5th, 2008, America's banks borrowed $1.2 trillion from the Fed. Furthermore, says Bloomberg, the banks borrowed that money from the Fed at as little as 1/100 of 1% interest. As a result, the banks were spared the need of selling off assets that paid much higher rates of interest. Bloomberg estimates the banks made a $13 billion profit on the spread on money they borrowed virtually free from the Fed. Bottom line, the nation's sixth largest banks saw their assets grow by 39% from September of 2006 to September of this year, from $6.8 trillion then to $9.5 trillion now.